No, I had a question. Yes, my question is this. We understand the Torah where it says, remember the Shabbat day to keep it holy, right? 6 days shall thou labor and do all your work. The seventh day is the Shabbat unto Yehovah thy God. In it thou shalt not do any manner of work, thou, thy son, thy daughter, thy manservant, maidservant, etc., etc. So then we see, I believe, in Exodus where it gives you the actual breakdown of what you should and should not do during the Shabbat, the things that you should do to prepare for the Shabbat day. As a man was found gathering sticks on the Shabbat day and it cost him his life. My question is this. In today's society, what is and what is not permissible on the Shabbat day? For example, some of us drive our cars to services, some being a result of the distance from where we are to our temples or our places of worship, camps, whatever you might call them. Some people might have a motorcycle. Some people might have electric bikes. What is permissible in terms of that? And also, can you give a clear explanation of people, what are the do's and the don'ts today for the Shabbat day? So it's sort of like two questions, but in one.
So the main answer, in terms of what it's, what we should, well, what the purpose of the Sabbath day is to stop from all of our work, number one. So based on what we read, as you mentioned, in Exodus chapter 20, and various other places, the word Sabbath, which is, as we pronounce it, Shabbat in the Hebrew text, derives from Yehovah God ceasing or stopping all work when creating the heavens and the earth. So as he did so, we learn from that template to stop our work. So now in terms of today's time, the things that we're supposed to be, or the things that we're supposed to stop doing is basically still everything. So as time goes along, the Sabbath day will always be the same. There are going to be new inventions. There are going to be things that come up as time goes along, but the Sabbath day's instructions will still be the same: to stop, rest our minds, rest our bodies. So now in terms of the specific things, and now I'll mention from this point onward in terms of my opinion. So now in terms of the things that occur today, because as you mentioned, some of us do drive vehicles to go to Sabbath services. And as you mentioned, whether it's motorcycles or electric, bikes or different things like that, people have, utilize different modes of transportation, or, take the train, take a cab, or, other means of transportation. So again, as continue on with this part of the conversation, this will be my opinion. Those things are still prohibited, but we understand that we do these things in order to get to a location where we are able to worship Yehovah God on the Sabbath day. And we just pray along with that, that he would forgive us of those things, and that he would look down favorably upon us as we are attempting to worship him and, get to places of worship on the Sabbath day. So those things overall, in the general scheme of things, will still be prohibited. But again, as you mentioned, we do them today as we go to places of worship. So that's why it's important for us not to abuse certain, for lack of a better term, privileges that we may, or certain privilege, for lack of a better term, privilege that we may be afforded during this time, where we not be struck dead. Because again, by profaning the Sabbath day, and again, with the Sabbath day, there are two things that are mentioned. It says that we shouldn't work on the Sabbath day, and we're not supposed to profane the Sabbath day. So those are two different concepts. Again, that could go into another conversation. the work is the actual physical stuff, you know, going to your actual job, doing schoolwork, doing housework, or any type of work, of course, anything physical. That's the work that has to stop. And then when it talks about profaning the Sabbath day, that's something that's not physical. And we get an example of that in the book of Isaiah, where we're told that we're supposed to enjoy the Sabbath day, not delve into our own pleasures, and also not speak about our own pleasures as well. So our conversations are some of the things that can profane the Sabbath day as well. So the mindset of us getting into the Sabbath day, you mentioned, you know, preparation. The mindset of going into the Sabbath day is to be fully prepared. We read specifically, we're not supposed to light any fires on the Sabbath day. We're not supposed to cook on the Sabbath day, which, well, we're not supposed to bake or boil on the Sabbath day. So, of course, those are just, in general, we say we don't cook on the Sabbath day. And, you know, we're not supposed to have anybody work for us in the Sabbath day. So even though we're not going to work, we're not supposed to have anybody else work for us. We're not supposed to do any business on the Sabbath day. Again, the Sabbath day is just for a day to stop. But so therefore, when we come to today's time, we just have to make sure that we don't abuse some of the things that we may utilize as an avenue in our worship and our service of the Most High God. So that's probably as simple an answer, but actually the simplest answer is that we're not supposed to be doing anything on the Sabbath day. But again, as we're in our dispersed state, you know, being in different countries, different locations, and even within the locations that we do exist, you know, we're not all living, you know, near each other. So we have, we utilize means to get together to worship. You know, many people utilized, and I know you'll be going into this in a few weeks when we read in the book of the Maccabees, where Sabbath observance was prohibited by the Syrians or the Syrian Greeks, that the children of Israel used to leave from their towns, you know, climb mountains and go to other places in order that they can observe the Sabbath day. So they ended up doing things they weren't supposed to be doing on the Sabbath day in order that they can have a peace of mind on the Sabbath day from the Syrian Greeks. So again, we just pray that the Most High would accept us as we do certain things to help facilitate our worship. But again, you know, it's not for us to make the excuses, but we're just praying for mercy that the Most High would help us gain an understanding as we go along. And, you know, ultimately, as we've been reading in these books, these chapters, Isaiah, you know, hasten the return of the restoration of the children of Israel.
So just to get a little bit more specific, so regular conventional cars versus, let's say, an electric car. So the prohibition on using a car would be because when we turn the key, it ignites a fire. Am I correct? So now with an electrical car, it doesn't ignite a fire. It's just electric current running through the actual vehicle. So would it technically be something wrong with just using a vehicle, period, a means of transportation? Or is it because the light is being kindled in the conventional car, a gas car, rather than an electric car? I'm going to go step by step, then I'm going to
Right.
ask some other questions.
Right. So for my opinion, is the operating of the vehicle that is the prohibition for the Sabbath day, not the sparks. Because you'll probably still, I mean, you know, I haven't looked into the entire electrical system for vehicles, but even without getting into that, it's just the operation of the vehicle. So it'd be the operation of any machinery, the
Gotcha.
operation of, you know, any tools, you know, those things would be prohibited on the Sabbath day. We also have to look at, as you mentioned it, you know, in the book of Numbers, where in chapter 15, where a man was put to death for gathering sticks. And that may seem like a simple task, you know, especially in our time looking back, but it was a serious thing that he did in profaning the Sabbath day by gathering the sticks. And it doesn't, it didn't mention what he was gathering the sticks for. He didn't get, put to death because because he lit any fires from those sticks that he gathered. He got put to death just for gathering the sticks. And again, it didn't mention how big um they were, whether it was, twigs or branches or logs that he was, putting together. It was just the act of putting them together that caused him his life. So when when we're reminded of that, when we think about Sabbath observance, and we should consider that again, that was a simple task that somebody got put to death for. So again, when it comes to vehicles and cars and things like that, it's the operation of the vehicles that will be the prohibition for the Sabbath day.
So also, when we get to bicycles and an electric, let's say, moped or an electric bike, where you don't necessarily have to pedal, your thing would be just in operating it on the Sabbath. It will be the
Right.
violation. Am I correct?
It is the operation of it on the Sabbath, yeah.
All right. So then is there an amount of distance that you could walk on the Sabbath per se? If you have to go, let's say to a place of worship, is there an allotted distance? Because let's say some people might say, all right, I'm not, because we know that also taking public transportation or either taking a taxi or Uber or Lyft, that would be a form of business that you're doing, that transaction. But like you said earlier, certain things we ask that the Most High God will see because of our situations, of us getting there, that He will forgive us. And we understand that we are breaking that law in terms of that. But then would there be an acceptable distance for a person to walk to get to a congregation?
There's nothing written in the Holy Scriptures about that, nothing written in Torah about that, but there probably is. And that determination was probably something that was known at that time. So I would say most likely there is, but there's nothing written. Because the people were living, especially when the Sabbath was given to the children of Israel, they were already dwelling amongst their tribes. So if they were going to go anywhere to pray and worship on the Sabbath day, it was most likely not far anyway. Even though the children of Israel were scattered probably long distance out in the desert, but when they were worshiping amongst themselves, amongst their families, they probably weren't traveling much. So there probably is a distance, but there's nothing written about that.
Great. So next question in terms of the Sabbath, I'm being very specific because I want you to answer some of this for some of the new people that might not know. So in terms of, us growing up, basically the Sabbath day, we shut everything down. We might have a cassette listening to some teachings or maybe some music that was suitable for the Shabbat day. But today, with the advancement of technology and everything, we actually, a lot of us turn on our TVs to watch services, right? For most part, that's acceptable. Am I correct with you?
In terms of the, okay, let me give my opinion again.
Okay.
So, because as you mentioned, back in time, not that it was so long ago, but yeah, we didn't turn TVs on at all. Even during the time when we were already driving vehicles, places of worship, we weren't turning TVs on and listening to secular music and listen to the radio and things like that. So today we have places of worship that do broadcasts. So you most likely would have to turn on your phone with your smartphone. Let me just be specific. Your smartphone to open up an app or open up a web browser to watch services on the Sabbath day, as well as turn on the TV and do the same thing. I would still say the operation of those devices would be prohibited on the Sabbath day. That's why it'd be, again, same thing with the vehicle. I'm going to use the same template that we're using as a mode of getting into a state of mind of worship on the Sabbath day. We're asking that the Most High would forgive us for doing certain things, but also at the same time, that's why it's imperative that we don't abuse our use of TVs and phones and apps and things like that on the Sabbath day, because again, we also have to bear in mind of profaning the Sabbath day. So it's not, again, just about the physical work, because again, these are just two separate concepts that still are punishable by death or cause us to be cut off, as we read in Exodus chapter 31, working on the Sabbath day and profaning the Sabbath day. Also, again, we see two concepts even in the book of Exodus chapter 20, where it says, 6 days shall you labor and do all your work. So on the Sabbath day, you don't labor and you don't do work. Now that, again, those concepts go into something else that we might have to go into like the Hebrew terminology to describe the different categories that are mentioned there, because they're, because it was two separate terms mentioned, labor and work. Well, that's the translation. Let me just say that's the translation we've been given, labor and work. But they were actually two different concepts Hebraically in regard to the Sabbath day. So I'm using this as the basis why I'm giving the opinion in terms of we wouldn't operate any machines, wouldn't operate any vehicles, wouldn't operate any devices on the Sabbath day, because of these diverse concepts that are not just talking about physical or strenuous work, but things that can also profane the Sabbath day, even if it's minimal physical activity.
Okay, so let's say someone, and I'm being very specific. I know the answers to these, but I want you to answer it, because sometimes we need a refresher course on these things, and because we have so many new things that people do. So I know we spoke about a walk, but let's say a walk is something that you do every evening. Let's say you walk down to you walk around your block. You walk to the park around where I live by, not too far from where you live at. There's a cemetery. People walk around it. Is that prohibited? It, to take a walk, is it prohibited on the Shabbat day?
Taking a walk is not prohibited, because again, even though we're told to stop and stop from work and doing certain things, we still move as human beings. We're still going to have some sort of activity, because we're going to eat on that day. So we're going to even move from getting out of our beds, going to the bathroom, going to the kitchen to get something to eat. We're in a place of worship. We may walk from a sanctuary area to a dining area to eat. So the concept of quote unquote walking is not prohibited on the Sabbath day. Walking for exercise would absolutely be prohibited. Like if you taking a walk, because you're saying, well, I just ate some food and I need to burn these calories off. If that's the concept that you're having for taking a walk, then that would be prohibited. But just saying like, okay, it's a nice day, you with your family, you just want to walk around the block, or just take a walk just to spend some time with your family and just get some breeze, then that wouldn't be prohibited. So again, if you're walking for the purpose of exercising, then that would be prohibited.
So when you're walking, don't count the steps. Leave the watch at home and just go for a walk. Don't
You just
count the
go for a
steps.
walk and don't do it for the purpose of, yeah, I'm full
Exercise.
and I need to lighten my load by taking a walk around the block and then come back to the bathroom. Then that's not what the walk should be for.
Okay, so now when now I'm being very specific. I know you might have mentioned this. You're in college, and you cramped up for work. Work is cramming up, or whatever, and there's an exam Monday, you need all the time that you need to study. I'm not turning on the TV, but I need to cram and study. And I'm not doing any physical work, but I'm in my bed and I'm reading the papers and I'm taking in this knowledge, and it's something for the future of the nation, and I need to study. God understands. Is that okay?
No, that's not okay. That will fall in the category of profaning the Sabbath day. Studying for an exam, taking exams, because what comes to mind is like probably regents, SATs, just something that's probably more general, but any type of exam, in the schools, and so no studying, no writing reports. Again, along with the question, because even today's time, we have computer programmers, we have computer scientists, we have IT professionals, we have cybersecurity professionals, and a bulk of their work is just thinking and typing. So that's not too strenuous on the body physically, but again, that would be profaning the Sabbath day if you're gonna write a computer program, write a report, a book report or any type of report, doing research, doing your Googles, as they would say, in order to do a part of it, research for school, anything scholastic, that will be prohibited, and that will fall under the category of profaning the Sabbath day. So I just gave the general answer first and just gave a little explanation, around it in terms of that would be profaning the day to do those type of things. So again, and just for the sake of those listening, as you mentioned, just repeating these concepts. We're not supposed to work in the Sabbath day, and we're not supposed to profane the Sabbath day. I'm just gonna repeat these two concepts as these questions are coming along, and also mentioning in Exodus 20, it said, "Don't labor and don't do work." Two separate concepts there also. So again, it covers a lot. So the safest thing for us to do on the Sabbath day is to do as little as possible. That's where our mindset should be when it comes to the Sabbath day. If you are used to going to a place of worship, that should just be your only objective of the day, to get to that place of worship God, and go back home. Whether you go back home on the Sabbath day or you go back home after the Sabbath day, your objective, if you're going to leave your house, is to go to a place of worship. And also, speaking about that, while we're on that, may or may not be a question that you're gonna ask, because there are some people that say that you shouldn't leave your house on the Sabbath day. They refer to Exodus 16 in regards to that, but when you read Exodus 16, it doesn't say do not leave your house, it says do not leave your place. Just given the exact wording that it says. And it said do not leave your place. And that's in regards to the people leaving their place to go to gather manna that they were doing on the 6 working days in an attempt to go find manna on the 7th day. So God was very specific. He didn't say don't leave your house, which people translate in their minds today and say that's the reason why they don't leave their homes on the Sabbath day. It literally said don't leave your place. And when you read the context, it's talking about going forth to gather manna on the 7th day. So just wanted to add that as well. Yeah, that's why. That's why I was specific in just saying there was nothing written in the first 5 books specifically, or probably anywhere in well, actually not written anywhere in the Holy Scriptures, the Old Testament, in regards to a distance that you can walk on the Sabbath day. But that's why I also said, but there probably is a distance that you cannot walk beyond.
Oh,
But
hold on.
Mhm.
I had myself muted. Let me repeat that. Sister Nislakia, I see your follow-up question. I'm going to ask it at the end of these series of questions. But Zion Lex TV, or my brother Chief Avdiel, he writes, Takum Shabbat, the oral tradition describes that we are allowed to walk no more than 2,000 amot, approximately 1 mile. Rabbi?
Yeah, so that's the reason why I said specifically there's nothing written in the Holy Scriptures that mentions a distance that you can't walk beyond on the Sabbath day. But I also said that there probably is a distance, but it's just not written within the text of the Holy Scriptures, because during different time frame, in the different time phases amongst Israel and with the judges of those particular times, they would set a certain rule in terms of people walking. As the nation continued to grow, villages and territories were opening up, judges would probably have a cutoff point and be like, this is too far for the Sabbath day.
So, for example, you go on a vacation, right? It's the Sabbath day. Let's say you have an Airbnb that has a pool, private. It's just you and your family. Can you take a dip in that pool on the Sabbath day?
So this would be a question that I'll be stuck on. And what is an Airbnb or your own private pool? Or
Yeah,
whether
your own private pool at home.
private,
It doesn't matter.
or whether
You're at a
you
beach.
live,
You're at a
live near a
beach,
beach, right?
private beachfront,
Right.
right? Is it okay? Is it okay to take a dip, go into the water, etc., etc.?
Okay, so now that you're being specific with the question, I'll say it's not a problem just going into the water. Where I would be stuck on is, if you're just mentioning going to the water to take a swim and do certain things like that. That's where I would say, like, those are getting to those gray areas. And it would probably be best to just leave, the pool alone, or leave the beach waters alone, for that aspect. But of course, there's nothing wrong with, touching water, going in water, because on the Sabbath day, we'll take a bath anyway. We'll take a shower. So just for the literal purpose of, is it wrong to go in water on the Sabbath day? Then no, it's not wrong to go, in water on the Sabbath day. But in terms of the pleasure aspect, the swimming aspect, those gray areas, I would be stuck in answering it, but I would just say stay away from it because of that reason.
You don't want to. You don't want people to mistake it to be like you're out there just doing your own pleasure, basically.
Right, because I don't want to say that you can go in the water, start floating, even if you're not doing like a full swim exercise, just going there just to float and do stuff like that. That would be another gray area, and you just want to leave that alone. But if you're going to the beach, like say, especially in ancient times, people would go to the beach just to take their actual bath. Because not everybody, especially back then, it's not like people had like bathtubs in their homes regularly. So going to the river, we'll add that to the list as well. Going to the river, going to a lake, going to the beach. These were the places people would go to take a bath, an actual bath to clean themselves. So it'd be nothing wrong with going to those places at all, just to take a bath to clean yourself. But just like with everything else, you have to be careful of what you're going to be doing afterwards. So if you're going to go to the beach or the river to take a bath, just do that. Don't start doing laps. You don't get caught up in that aspect.
So the other question would be, it says no manner of work, right? You should do no manner of work, right? Or labor.
Right, no matter work.
So when you have newborn babies, when you have and they're born on the Sabbath, and then they have to be and if it's a male child, if he's born on the Sabbath, he's also circumcised on the Sabbath. Obviously, you can't predict when a baby's being born, right? So that would be something that's a natural process of life. So we can't categorize. I mean, someone has to deliver the baby. That those things are understood. Am I correct?
Yes.
But in terms of the circumcision, would there be an exception to do it a day before or the day after, being that cutting the baby might be deemed as some sort of work? Or is it more of a command, or how would you categorize that?
And so the command for circumcision for a male child is to do it on the 8th day. There was no exception given to do it on any other day. So the circumcision would be done on the Sabbath day. The circumcision, and again, so now my opinion would be the circumcision would not fall into the category of the quote unquote work or labor that is mentioned in Exodus 20, and would not, of course, be a profanation of the Sabbath day, because it's the fulfillment of child coming into the covenant. So things such as doing the circumcision, of course, like you mentioned, babies being born. So you would have nurses, doctors, midwives performing that duty on the Sabbath day. Caretakers for those who are sick. There wouldn't be anything wrong with taking care of the sick on the Sabbath day, because of course that would lead into other questions in terms of whether people should work in hospitals and urgent care and things like that. That would be in today's time, of course, because doctors, nurses, and staff would be going there to work for their salary. That's pretty much their primary duty of going to work in a hospital and all those medical facilities. So therefore, you should not go to work. In terms of going to punching the clock at a hospital and things like that. Also being a home attendant is adding these things on the Sabbath day, because these are technically, or actually not technically, this is your business and you're doing it for salary or doing it for pay. So therefore, it would be prohibited on the Sabbath day of doing that under those pretenses, especially today. But just the general concept of just taking care of the sick, because hospitals, we also, in these questions and other questions that come up about the Sabbath day, we have to think about how the Sabbath day would be observed if the children of Israel, as we read earlier, is the servant of God, being a light to the nation, how the children of Israel would actually observe the Sabbath day dwelling in their own land. And we have to consider the amount of things that were already mentioned that would not actually be in operation today, because we'd have to think about the people, the physical human power that is necessary in order to keep those things going. Like people, we pick up our phones and we think because on our end, it's easy to pick up a phone, go to an app, do certain things on the phone. There are people on the other side keeping that thing going. So now if we're in a land where everybody has to stop on the Sabbath day, all of the things that we use, that we think are simple to use on the Sabbath day, those things would be shut down, because there would be nobody working to keep those things going. People think that a lot of these things are just automatic, but when you think about it from the other end, when you think about it from the computer science aspect, you think about it from the technical aspect, there are humans behind those things keeping those things going. So again, with these questions, we also have to think about how the nation of Israel would actually operate dwelling in the land. But again, just to get back to the simple question, or the original question, and the simple answer for it. Taking care of those who are sick, doing certain things, circumcision, those things are not prohibited on the Sabbath day.
So then it's safe to say that when we go back home, that we're going to have operational hospitals and we're going to have a staff on board.
Wow. Yeah, because you're going to have hospitals because...
So are those going to be jobs that are permissible on the Sabbath, caretaking?
Yeah, because you'll have to have people that's going to have, that will be needed to tend to the sick. So whether it's it's most likely going to be staff rotation.
Right.
It's most likely going to be taking care of, well, this is just a guess, most likely taking care of...
It's basically like a commitment. It's a commitment.
Oh, yeah, commitment.
It's almost like the priest's commitment.
Right.
They work even if it's the Sabbath.
Right.
That sort of thing.
They're gonna get compensated. I just using the word compensation, they will be compensated for their duties. The same as you mentioned, the priests.
Right.
The priests may not necessarily get their compensation for specifically doing something on the Sabbath day, but their job dictates that they will be compensated. So the same way those that are on call and have to do hospital duty, same thing with police officers. So those that are guarding gates, making sure that the peace is kept, those people would still have to do their duties. So I use the word duty as opposed to job or work. There will still be a commitment, as you using that word that you mentioned, or a duty that they would have to perform in order for the society to keep going.
So someone C Cole wrote, Shalom Chief Lewy, Chief Uzia Lewy. What about traveling on trains during Shabbat with passengers that might be unclean? Should we stand until we make the place of worship so we don't become unclean? That's a question for you. You can answer that right
That
now.
would be based on the comfort of the individual doing so. As we mentioned, taking a train, taking various modes of transportation would be an actual prohibition of the Sabbath day, but we do certain things to get to places of worship. I'm praying that the Most High would have compassion and mercy on us for doing so. And these are the risks that we run anyway, just going outside of our homes, whether you're doing the train, whether you're doing the cab, um, even, for some instances, probably even your own car, depending on the uncleanness that it may have contracted, during the week, or someone passed on it during the week and without the proper cleaning being done. So in today's time, there's a lot of care that has to be taken in regards to maintaining cleanliness on the Sabbath day and traveling to a place of worship. And it's almost, especially if you're riding a train, it's almost unavoidable, even if you don't sit down. And as you know, you're riding the bus, you never know who might bump into you, man or woman that you may bump into, come in contact with. Something simple as even if you don't sit down in the train, you still got to pass through that turnstile. And as you pass, especially, it's probably the same in a lot of other cities too, but especially in New York City, think about it, how you get through the turnstile is by pushing your body across that on turnstile and get through. So as people do that all throughout the day, that also becomes unclean. So just the transit system is probably almost unavoidable. And uncleanness on the public transportation is probably almost unavoidable. Just to simply answer that question.
So so then that would mean also that sexual cohabitation with your spouse is is
Prohibited, right?
prohibited. Right, that was the word I
Right.
was
Because
looking
the
for.
thing is, we have to be clean. So we have to be, and even if you think that you're not going to go to a place of worship on the Sabbath day, we are still, enjoined to maintain cleanliness, especially on when it deals with holy matters, and of course when it deals with holy days. Our goal should be to maintain cleanliness at all times,
Gotcha.
whenever possible. Of course, things are going to happen out of our control, man or woman, but those things that are the natural course of life that you didn't bring about, those are the things that you can't control. But with the things that you can control, when it comes to making a separation between the clean and the unclean, we should opt for being clean.
And the concept behind that is because we're repairing before the Creator, right?
Right.
And we should be in a
And
clean
because
state.
the day is holy, and we want to maintain cleanliness on the holy day overall.
Gotcha. The Most High don't dwell in the midst of uncleanliness. He deals in the that concept. So I try to pretty much cover everything. So in a nutshell, we have a lot of youth. Sometimes they tend to well, not only youth, but a lot of adults, especially with devices and things of that nature. A lot of things come on Friday night. They might because we're growing up in this generation, there are more electronic generation. I think we're that in between generation where we know, we know our parents and we also know the technology. What would be your advice to the youth who constantly have the phones in their hands? You see them, they're always looking down on their phone. Regular days, Shabbat, it doesn't matter. They're always looking down at the phone. What would be your advice as a leader in this community, a rabbi, a chief? What would be your advice to them in terms of those devices and how far they could, they could sync themselves with them?
So my advice, and that would be for anybody, old or young, when it comes to devices, is to limit it or minimize the use of it, if at all, to nothing on the Sabbath day. Because then we can get into the area of profaning the Sabbath day. You end up going on social media and seeing something, then get to the point of liking something, liking a post or commenting on a post that has nothing to do with the holiness of the Sabbath day. Many of our social media pages are not connected to people that are just Sabbath observers. So once you go in certain apps, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, all those things, chances are you have friends that are not Sabbath observers. So there are going to be things on your timeline that you open yourself up to that would cause you to profane the Sabbath day, even if you just see it for a moment, because then you start getting into the thought of it. It's like, as you mentioned, like back in it. So let me. That was the simple answer first. So now we get into some scenarios, like as you mentioned, back in the days, we wouldn't watch TV and certain things like that. So like Chief Uza, wasn't watching like Knicks games on Friday nights. Knicks versus Bulls. He wouldn't know what took place on a Friday night. You would assume that Jordan beat up on the Knicks anyway, but chances are you didn't find out what actually happened until the following, after Shabbat or after the Sabbath day.
Correct, right.
Today, being on devices and being on apps, chances are you might find out what happened because you might have friends that's commenting on it. Something big, like people probably knew that Tyson lost the fight before the Sabbath was over because you went on some app and your friends were talking about it.
Not only
Or there
that,
might have been
notifications.
a sponsored post about it or something like that. So the
Or
general advice,
notifications.
notifications, a lot of things. The general advice would be to, if possible, don't use the device at all on the Sabbath day for app usage. Let me just say it like that. But then that gets into the conversation we had earlier because congregations stream on the Sabbath day. So you just have to, if you're going to go on your phone or device to watch services, then that should be what you're going straight to do. If at all possible, I mean, there's many things you could do with your device. You could put it in do not disturb mode, so it turns off all your notifications. So you don't have to worry about that aspect. And then if you're going to go on YouTube to watch a congregation, then you just go straight to that. And even that's risky because once you go on YouTube, you're probably going to see some stuff in your YouTube timeline that lets you know what happened last night anyway, before you get to your congregation's channel. So again, so the simple advice would be to limit device use. And if at all, don't use it at all. But if you're going to use it to go into like a Bible app so you can follow along in your services, if you're going to go on an app to watch services, then just make sure that that's all you're doing. But just to go, as you mentioned, people on their phones just scrolling, then that would be prohibited on the Sabbath day because you're just doing something that's profaning the Sabbath day, going on the timeline of some of those apps and just scrolling just to scroll and just to see what's going on, see what people are posting, liking and making comments and stuff like that. And that would take your mind away from the Sabbath day.
Listen, and I'm asking all of these things and I'm saying all of these things. And with some of these things, I might have fallen guilty of them, scrolling through apps and things. But these distractions sometimes are serious. And the reason why I concentrated those questions for the rabbi, because I know how he is. He turns off his phone on the Shabbat. You can't, Shabbat, holy day, you could call him, and he's not picking up the phone. You know, not necessarily me. I always have to check the stream. I got to watch to see what people are saying in the chat. And sometimes I get distracted because of that. And sometimes you see a notification come in because you have the phone open or whatever. That's par for the course for me, because that's part of my job. And it's crazy that I'm saying this, but it's part of my job on the Shabbat to be abreast of what's happening in terms of the chat and the stream and things of that nature. But I'm bringing it so that we could see and we understand the severity of the Shabbat day. That's why I asked so many questions and the series of questions that I asked, so that we could be on top of it. It says here, Shalom, Chief Uziel and Binyamin. Can you explain Genesis chapter 15, 13, 14? Many think that this is speaking on that so-called Asaiah from the new book. I totally disagree with that. Hallelujah. This is from Jonathan Evans.
He said Genesis 15 verses
13 and 14.
13 and 14.
Yeah.
And before I get into that question, just also think about, utilizing apps and utilizing social media is the same as, just being in contact with the general public. Like, growing up, the Sabbath day, we would separate ourselves from people. Like, people know that on what people will call Friday night, that's not when we're going to go out. People are not going to see us hanging out outside. We're not going to mingle with, even throughout the day. We're not mingling with the public. We're not doing anything that would make it seem like we're joined with people, with non-Sabbath observers in any way. So the same thing, think about it with social media, even though it's minimal or no physical contact with anybody. Just maintaining that separation of the Sabbath day where people know that you're unavailable. That's probably the better way to explain it, to think about it. On the Sabbath day, with the exception of emergencies, you should be unavailable to family and friends, or just people in general on the Sabbath day. Again, just stressing with the exception of emergencies. So you might, depending on your situation, depending on your family structure, of course, you would keep your phone on so people are calling in the case of emergency, or send you a text or something like that. But that's all you would need. You wouldn't need to go on the app to receive information about an emergency. So, again, so when dealing with the phones and devices, just limited to the things that you may deem necessary, and avoiding all the distractions that could come along with the Sabbath.